All right, everybody, welcome back. I'm excited for today. We have Dr. Douglas Kratt here with us, Central Animal Hospital based out of Wisconsin. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me today.
We always like to start. You can give a better bio about yourself than I can, and you certainly have a lot. You have a ton of history in practice and outside of practice. So I guess share a little bit about how'd we get here. What's your story?
So I'm a small animal practitioner in Onalaska, Wisconsin. Like you said, I practice with my wife, who's also a veterinarian. I purchased the practice in October of 1998 after graduating in May of 1998. My wife came on board in 2000, and we've been practicing here ever since. We're a AAHA certified clinic and a 3-doctor practice, pretty much like the rest of the industry. Now, trying to find an additional associate. My wife and I are also very active in organized veterinary medicine, whether it be within our state associations. Both of us have held numerous posts within our state associations, including the presidency, or serving with the American Veterinary Medical Association in numerous capacities, including I was the COVID president, so to speak, the 2020-2021 president. So,
I mean, there's so many angles we can go with that. Talk to us. Let's start there. Talk to us about that past presidency with the AVMA. What'd you learn? What'd you take back to practice? What were your thoughts and takeaways from that position?
I would tell you, as far as organized veterinary medicine, it probably rounded me out better than I ever thought it would. So, when you're within your practice, you're kind of looking at your day-to-day practice and the employees you have with it and the pets you see and the clients. But in organized veterinary medicine, you kind of get to see a bigger picture, some of the rules and regulations that are coming down the path or that may affect you in any number of aspects. But then it's not just small animal, you're looking at regulatory medicine, or you're looking at production medicine, or you're looking at people within industry and what's happening in their neck of the woods. Plus, you get a better idea maybe on how different people that are allied within our industry are handling things. So the veterinary technicians and veterinary assistants, what their challenges are, and then I can bring that back. Plus, I have my real world experience with part of my own team. So I would tell you with all of it, it kind of changed my lens and broadened it a little bit.
Did it change your day to day? Like, are you practicing medicine differently?
I think, yes. How can I say that? Well, I think when we became an AAHA clinic, which we were very early on, that changed how we practiced, right? So we had all these standards that we wanted to achieve. I don't want to say we had to achieve, but we wanted to achieve. And so that changed it a little bit. But then you also hear about some regulations that were coming down, or at least that they were considering. And you all go, okay, this is probably what best practices are going to be. So why don't we go ahead and start trying to adapt them into our practices? I would also would tell you that it changed the culture within the practice as well. Probably being more open to listening to my team than I ever was, and trying to make adjustments ahead of time and what was best for ours. There's no cookie cutter practices. And so what was going to work best for a practice in the Midwest, what was going to be for a smaller community in Wisconsin, but also that I felt comfortable being able to, or proud of, putting our label on.
In that position, did it require you to build a stronger, more cohesive leadership team within the practice? Because I would assume serving as a president, that took you away from the exam room quite often.
It did. So, as I said, my wife's a veterinarian here. Early on, I think we separated the management and the medicine portion of things. We blended it a little bit more. But then when I've brought on Granite Peak to my practice, which I've been very thankful for, that was also an evolution of a practice manager that we had here. Jess is my practice manager. To say she's my right-hand person isn't, it's very much an understatement. So we co-manage this, but I definitely gave more and more of the management side to her, gave her more of the reins, and definitely a lot more autonomy to run the practice, which I think has been better for both of us.
Certainly gives you time to focus on the things that you want to do. Do you still poke in and say hey, psst, I think we should be doing that this way?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to say that, but we'll talk about issues together. The great thing, the reason I think that trust came up is that if we don't maybe not make the same decision. If there's a decision that might be slightly different, I may not have made it that way. She tells me what her thought process was, and then I can understand where we came from. Doesn't mean that it wasn't a correct decision. In fact, it may have been even a better decision than I would have made. I think that's the nice thing. And we do work as a team, a management team between the two of us, and bounce ideas off of each other. So we don't run parallel to each other. We definitely are interwoven as we're running the practice.
Interwoven as you run the practice clearly. I mean, with your wife right there alongside you in the exam room, how does that dynamic clearly? It must be an outstanding experience to be able to work directly with your wife. But are you ever able to separate the business from, when you're at home?
We do, but it's so much of the fiber of our relationship. And it was, we were both in veterinary school together. We both worked together. So there are times, I know everybody talks about work-life balance. I call it as work-life integration is probably a better term for me and for my wife. So we do have times where we separate it and we want to, unplug from the practice, so to speak. But being as we're practice owners, I don't know if we ever fully get unplugged, but we have a good team that can handle a lot of things. So it's not like when we leave the practice and we come back and now there's 30 little fires to put out. Those aren't there because of the team that's there. But we bounce ideas off of cases with each other, and we frequently, our cases will be, I don't want to say co-managed, but we each have our strengths. Dr. Kim Kratt and I each have our strengths. So if I get a case that I'm not as comfortable with something, I'll be happy to ask her about it. And to say that when we go home and we're cooking dinner, that we don't talk about Central Animal Hospital or veterinary medicine or organized veterinary medicine, I'd be lying to you completely, because it is very much part of our life.
Sure. I love that. And I am a strong believer, and I would love to hear what that means to you, like the work-life integration, because the work-life balance, I do feel like it's often used, but misunderstood, and it's a pendulum. It's very hard to get right. And I don't know if I challenge it a little bit. I don't know if I believe it. So what does the work-life integration mean to you?
So, I've been fortunate. Owen Central Animal Hospital, I'm very fortunate to be a veterinarian. It's not all roses, but that practice, including being fortunate to have Dr. Kim Kratt be with us. We have 2 children. And so our life, being we don't have 2 separate incomes to balance each other out in 2 different industries, this has allowed us to live the life that we've had. And so for me to say, oh, nope, I'm turning it off, and Central Animal Hospital doesn't affect my personal life, my children's personal life, which are now both adults, by the way, my wife's life, that's not true. And it's different for everybody, right, Jared? So, and Megan, I'm sure you've seen it as well. Some people want to have 8 weeks of vacation a year and a lot of that aspect of it. I was having a conversation with one of my colleagues a couple of years ago. I'm like, if someone forced me to take 8 weeks of vacation and unplug, I don't think that's going to be healthy for me either. Right. Now, it doesn't mean someday I don't hope that may be when I get to retire, but I'm sure I'm still going to dabble in it. And again, it is part of who I am. What I've told you was going to be part of who I am when I was 20? No, but I had a work ethic back then, and I think that it's tailored through. But the message is it's different for every one of the 150,000 veterinarians, and obviously 5 times that for the number of technicians and assistants in this world, and then CSRs and practice managers and everything else. We're all just different with it. And I think we have to find that integration or that balance that makes us all feel comfortable.
So I have a semantics question. Jared asked these really probing questions, and I want to know, if someone calls up and wants an appointment with Dr. Kratt, who do they get?
Well, we usually ask the staff's very well trained. That is it Dr. Kim Kratt or Dr. Doug Kratt?
Mr. Doctor.
Yeah. Obviously I've got some that want to see me and some that would much more prefer to see my wife.
I love that dynamic though, right?
Yeah.
You have so many stories and perspectives and things that you've seen along the way. What are you most excited about in veterinary medicine in the future? Because, even in just a short sample size over the past, 5 or 6 years, it feels like it's drastically changed. So is there 1 or 2 things that really stick out for you?
First of all, I'm very hopeful for the profession. It seems like we keep having a negative narratives at times. And although I know that they're challenges, which are opportunities. What am I most hopeful of? I think we're just seeing leaps and bounds how technologies can help us in our everyday practices. And when I say practice, I even do think that spills over into industry veterinarians, regulatory veterinarians, or whatever. So, probably maybe just over a year ago, we were using note-taking software, artificial intelligence note-taking software with us in the exam rooms. That is, that has helped how more complete my medical records are than they had been the previous 25 years or 24 years of my career. And so I see that. I don't see that as a substitute for what I'm doing. I see that as making life going easier. So I think that that's one of the aspects that I want to see how we continue to go down that. And that's going to go, I really see artificial intelligence going. We're already seeing it in radiology, but it's going to happen more and more within all of our diagnostics to give us an extra set of eyes to make sure that we're not too tunnel vision when we're working up our cases in my particular instance. Again, not getting rid of veterinarians, not getting rid of veterinary technicians, not getting rid of customer service representatives, because we still need that human touch for the value of things. And I think that will never, in my lifetime, I don't think we're going to get past that. But I do think that I think it allows us to practice better medicine, and also to probably be able to connect with our clients a little bit quicker or a little bit better. Because if I'm not there trying to scribble notes and do things in the exam rooms, make sure I'm not forgetting things, if I can have the conversations in the exam rooms, be able to talk about what I'm finding in my physical exams, I think it's just a much better for everybody involved.
For sure, being more present in the moment.
Yeah, and the next thing, we continue to talk about consolidation for the last multiple years. There's still big areas for small privately owned practices or even large privately owned practices to do it. And then we're starting to see adjustments to what the traditional veterinary model was. So, again, we're back to a little bit more of home healthcare or euthanasias or pain management ones. And a lot of the other modalities that are coming in, I think, are there. We're also seeing a lot more specialization, but not necessarily by specialists. I think some general practitioners are finding their niche or what keeps them alive and vibrant and interested in the profession. They're going to go down those. So I don't think it'll always go just to the large referral institutions. I think we still have so much opportunity.
Would you have a message though for that individual who's anxious, nervous to take the leap, to buy a practice, to start a practice? They feel and see the consolidation happening everywhere. They hear the rumors how they couldn't compete on, retention or wages for their team. What message would you have for them to ensure that the private practice does continue to thrive?
I don't want anybody to go running with scissors, so to speak, but I think doing a little bit of your homework with it, getting a firm like you guys that can walk us through some of that aspect of it, but really make the jump. You can second guess it for 20 years and you're going to regret it. Yes, there is some benefits to being part of a large network practices. There's also some benefits to being locally owned, being able to make decisions locally. The competition for pay, the competition for purchasing, I think that those are a little bit more exaggerated than are truthfully out there. Yes, they're more upfront bonuses and things, but ultimately all practices need to be profitable if you're in private practice, whether it's the big aggregators or it's the small individual. We all have to make money, because if you're a big practice that's owned by a corporation, there's 400 other practices and yours isn't profitable, you're not going to be there. You're going to get moved to another practice at some point. And that's no different. But the advice is do your homework, but don't be afraid to make an investment on yourself and an investment in your community. I think that's the biggest thing I would say. And that's what I'm saying to the younger people that are coming out or just out. It's like, if you want to do it, if that's it, go for it. But once you're an owner, you're no longer just a veterinarian. Now you're a business owner. And I think maybe that integration we talked about changes a little bit.
Absolutely.
At least at the beginning, right? It's very front loaded with all your time and information. Thinking back on your tenure, your time as president, was there a poignant moment that you were like, "Oh, this is going to be my legacy," or something that you did or changed or took with you as your, swan song?
I don't like legacy. I think anybody that should be in leadership, especially for organized veterinary medicine, things like that, if you're worried about your legacy, you're there for the wrong reason. I think you're there to serve the membership. I think you're there to accept ideas. I think you're there to accept challenges. Everybody wanted to know what my platform was once I became president. It wasn't my platform. It was what the AVMA wanted and what the AVMA members wanted. And I think that that's the biggest thing. Prime example, I had 3 things I want to talk about, and I'm not even sure I can fully remember what they were, other than connecting with people was probably one of my number one things. But the little thing called COVID decided that we were adjusting everything at that point. And prior to that, this type of conversation, we didn't do a whole lot prior to COVID. And now to think that we would live without Zoom or a version of that is unthinkable anymore, right? And so it's really, when you're at those areas, being able to adjust, being able to adapt to how the groundwork may have changed, shifted in front of you. But again, legacies, I was asked a question, how do I hope to be remembered? And I think leaders, if they do it well, my statement is, I hope I'm not remembered from that aspect, to be honest with you. I just hope we all do a good job and think about the membership.
That's a very diplomatic answer.
And that's me, diplomatic.
Anything you miss about COVID? Right? COVID was such a wild time for all of us, and we were all kind of so in the weeds. Is there anything that you're like, oh, we were doing it right then?
So, prior to COVID, I don't want to make sure that I don't bring up bad memories, but we were talking about African swine fever and what African swine fever, if it hit the shores of the United States, would do to our pork industry. It would be majorly detrimental. And so we were on with a lot of our allied groups in regulatory medicine and the government, listening to this African swine fever and coming up with plans of what would happen if it hit our shores. And then all of a sudden there was this new disease that was popping up, and we were hearing a little bit more about it, and then frequent. And then all of a sudden there was a big shift we went from African swine fever, and now places are getting shut down, and SARS-CoV-2 is taking off, and how that's affecting everything. And, one of the things that happens when you're president, you get to travel internationally extensively, and all of that changed. But I think going back to one of my first statements, technology allowed us to keep moving. A lot of the practices to adapt and keep moving, because, that was another thing is, right? So, yep, we have SARS, we have all this stuff that we're talking about. Veterinarians were on the front lines and making sure the disease was, that we knew what was going on, because we're big researchers as well. But then, hey, Central Animal Hospital has to stay up, has to be able to give services to the patients, because they're still at home. They're still coming down with the same diseases or illnesses that they were. How are we going to do that? How are we going to do that so it's safe for everybody, especially in a big, wide, unknown space?
Mm-hmm.
And so being able to adapt it for my own personal use, and also be able to get the message out to the veterinary teams across the country.
You mentioned it a couple times, and in different ways, the connection to people, connection to community. You use the word relationships. Clearly that's ingrained in essential to you. How does Central Animal represent that? How do you connect and train your team to connect with the patients, with the clients, with the community?
So we brought different groups in to talk to us about different communication styles, conflict management, how to get things through to people. Also learning as we go as well, lower stress handling techniques and aspects of and that aspect of things. And so I think we continue to invest in ourselves, because I think that it's a huge benefit. And sometimes it's not a cost, it's not a risk reward type of a scenario. As I'm talking with people in the accounting area, right? But it's like, okay, these are soft skills. We need to invest in them because it's going to ultimately make people feel more welcome, which will bring them back. It'll also potentially cause me to look at the situation slightly differently instead of very clinical and analytical. What's the background? Why are these happening? If I give the best possible treatment options, but they're not feasible for the individual to be able to do that, or financially rewarding for them to be able to do that, or ability to do that, then it doesn't matter. Then it's irrelevant. If the pills can't make it in or the treatment can't make it into the vet, I could have gotten the right answer, but it's not going to be a good outcome for anybody. The connections are, the interpersonal connections are very important, both in the practice, with the clients, with the team, with other family members, in good and in bad situations. But then for us, it's other people that we're dealing with, whether it be potentially, I would say, our insurance people that we're dealing with, or, Jared, I could talk about the situation where you and I first met face to face. I can tell you the day that it was. Can't tell you the date, but I can tell you the day that it was. I can tell you where it was. And because I think we were interviewing each other whether this relationship would be a good relationship. Thus far, it's been a fantastic relationship, but it happened in Las Vegas, up in kind of a corner area, and got to meet you. And since then, that's it. But it's those relationships and that comfort level, being able to talk with people, being able to put clear expectations out. I think that knowing that helped me.
How often do you train your team on that? Is it something you dedicate time quarterly, annually? Is there a set cadence that you have?
I don't know if we have a set cadence, but we have a weekly meeting that starts with successes or challenges that we've had this in the week. Certain things that we also need to go after. We started something a little bit unusual, maybe about 4 or 5 months ago. Everybody's got a journal. If you want to use it, you can use it. If you don't want to use it, you don't have to use it. Gave it to everyone. We start with, they each get a stick at the beginning of it. And it's kind of, I don't want to say truth or dare, but it's a little bit like that of, found a little game for everybody to play of how to improve yourself to do. And so everybody grabs a stick every staff meeting and they jot it down. They can share their successes or what they learned each week. They don't have to. Frequently, there's a lot of laughing and giggling going on. It's with everybody, so it's a good thing. And I when I first went through and saw it, I'm like, oh, this is kind of hokey. I don't think this is going to work. And I brought it in and just kind of looked at me like, this is so not you. I said, I know, but let's give it a shot. And one meeting, I forgot to bring them out, and they're like, hey, where is it? And I'm like, all right, sorry, my fault. Let's do this. So.
Oh, I love that. See, I think you might be kind of fun. You might be low-key kind of fun. I love the website. Everyone should go to the website and look at your staff photo. Because are you a master panel boarder and that was just a bad moment, or is that not your thing?
I would tell you I am not a master paddle boarder, but my dogs have always wanted to go paddle boarding along. The Vizsla, who's now 14, I would start paddle boarding, and all of a sudden I'd turn around and she's like, yep, I know I'm supposed to stay on shore. I'm not staying on shore. And she'd be paddling behind. So she'd get there and I'd pop her up. Well, the one that you see is I was coming in and I was getting more towards the shadows, and they probably saw their favorite owner, my wife, and jumped off. And as you saw, I got a bath at the same time. So
it's a very pleasant surprise when you're on your website going through and you're like, oh, it's very endearing.
Thank you. When they wanted something, I don't know if that's what they wanted for my website, but that's what they were getting.
Love it. I love it.
Love it. Well, Dr. Kratt, really appreciate to have you on the podcast here, get to learn a little bit more about you, about the practice and all your accomplishments. So like you said, it's been a pleasure since getting to know you, and just looking forward to continued successes together in the future.
I greatly appreciate it. And I just hope everybody finds some positives in our profession and continues to work for them. We can change it. We are the change makers. And I think that's the direction we keep pushing.
Perfect. Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.